A real clockwork soldier.
Generation Orange in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Test. There we go. Okay, now, welcome to Generation Orange, guys.
Welcome to the technical difficulty episode of Generation Orange.
We were doing so good for a long time. Test. And then all of a sudden,
There we
it went
go.
to crap. Okay, now.
Yeah, we got to start off. I mean,
Welcome
we
to
were just in the
Generation
process of doing
Orange,
that.
guys.
So we got a couple of guests coming on tonight, and I'm in the process of getting
We were
ready to
doing so
text
good
message
for
one
a
of them,
long time.
none other than Hal
There
Kaiser.
we go. To crap. Okay, now.
Yeah, we got to start off. I mean,
Welcome
we
to
were just in the
Generation
process of doing
Orange,
that.
guys.
So we got a couple of guests coming on tonight.
Thank you, guys.
and
Thank you,
I'm
guys,
in the
for
process of
letting
getting
us
ready to
know.
text
Appreciate
message
it.
one
Just-
of them.
Yeah, I always stay on top of it.
Hal
'Cause-
Kaiser.
Well, and part of the problem, of course, is since we switched over to Pitch 25 last week, we had to move all of our
we got a couple of guests coming on
equipment,
tonight.
Thank you,
all
guys.
of
Thank
our,
you, guys,
our
for
setup and
letting
everything
us
had to be
know.
moved
Appreciate
in
it.
this process.
Yeah, I always stay on
things
top
get
of it.
disconnected.
Well,
and part of the problem, don't necessarily remember
since we
what
switched
the
over
different
to,
connections were, what the different settings were.
Yeah, and I took a couple of steps. Thank you, guys. Thank you, RGB, for our live stream over there, which in the process forgot to take the headphones, and it was fun. So if you guys haven't watched it, it is
Allergies are hardcore.
Yeah, and I took a couple of steps. And no worries, man. I really understand. There's some plates up there. Forgot to take the headphones, and
Oh yeah, we got Cisco over
was
here
fun.
too. He
So
decided
if
to
you
come
guys
join us
haven't
this week, which
watched it,
we are
it
extremely
is-
appreciative of as always. What?
really understand. There's some plates up there. Forgot to take the headphones.
Turn off the repeater.
Oh yeah, we got
turn off
Cisco
the.
over too. He's
I don't
to
think
join
it's
us
that.
this week, which we were extremely. What about now? You guys still got an echo? I bet they still got an echo. Oh, you had it on the computer and we're playing. Yeah, that's probably what
Yeah,
it
and
was.
it doesn't help that.
Echo, Darby, Blues, Callow, Brian, anybody? Is there now an echo? Is there no longer an echo? I need somebody to let me know. Very important. All right, we're good. Yeah, we got Hal coming on 7:30. He's going to go 7:30 to 8. So thankfully we started when we did. Have we seen the unicorn in the living room? Yeah, he's over there actually sitting on the couch right now. He is quite the fairy freaking unicorn, that's for sure. But we also have, so I said we have Hal Kaiser coming on from Keeper Notes / NWSL cover guy. Big time, everybody knows who he is. We also have Phil West coming on this week. Phil West writes for MLS. He's a writing professor at UTSA, all sorts of other places too. The guy covers soccer, knows soccer. He is. I'm actually really happy we were able to get him. Really excited we were able to get him. Thank you, Cisco, again for that. So we'll have him on at about 8 o'clock. So stay tuned for that for sure. But you know what? We mentioned it's been a good week. Dynamo secured Open Cup final, won Open Cup, which is fantastic. And let's be honest, there was no question after that first goal. Let me take that back. There was no question after the second goal. The first goal, I think you could say that there was a question because Philly were putting some pressure on. But once Dynamo got that second goal, it was like Philly just gave up. They weren't getting chances on frame. The chances they were getting, while they were decent, they were still covered. It wasn't like
and a lot of the shots that they did manage to get on target went straight towards Willis.
Yep, exactly. And then also Dynamo played Saturday against San Jose and came back from behind to win it. And I'm sure everybody by now has seen the picture and video of Cisco molesting poor Romel Kyoto. I'm pretty sure they've banned you from BBVA, by the way, for manhandling poor Romel Kyoto. El Romantico never meant more than it does today. Cisco's apparently going to come say hi. Oh, that was awkward. Appreciate you, Cisco. So we're about to call Hal here in just a minute. Let's see, what else is there to talk about this week? I mean, those are really the big key points. It's just we got these two guys coming on. Oh, last week's Gin Orange live show. It went really well. For those of you who were there, which is probably most everybody in this chat, we appreciate you coming out for sure. But also, we apologize for the technical difficulties as far as audio goes. The plan is the next time we have another one of those out there, we are going to. That's actually kind of cool that you can actually run both simultaneously, like actually see the video. Anyways, I'm getting distracted. ADD. We'll work with Pitch 25 to try to get those audio issues taken care of for next time, and I'm pretty sure we'll have them squared away by the time we have another one out there, which actually probably won't be that long in the future. Also, huge shout out to Paul Holliker. I was out at HSP over the weekend on Sunday morning. Sup, Cisco? Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. Sup, Cisco? What time did you wake up on Sunday, Cisco?
I was up at that time.
Then why did you reply back to me that, oh yeah, it was like 15, no, it was 30 minutes after I sent you that first text message.
Yeah, it was storming.
That's his excuse. It was not storming down here. I went out there, watched a couple of the youth teams play for a little bit, a couple of the academy teams play. It was pretty interesting. Definitely cool to be out there. Paul was kind of busy, so we didn't have a chance to really catch up or touch base, but he did send me a direct message after saying that the next time he's back in town, because he's actually back out, he's out somewhere else right now. But the next time he's back in town, we're gonna get together and so he and I can talk, which is gonna be kind of cool. And then, like I said, Dynamo played Saturday. Come from behind victory. It was pretty awesome. Kyoto with the final goal, but Morrow had one, Tomas had one, and Kyoto had one, which is pretty awesome just in and of itself. Morrow's on fire right now. Cisco and I made the comment to each other during the Open Cup match. Actually, he made the comment to me, and I had already kind of been saying it all along, but it's amazing what confidence can do for a striker. The level that Morrow started playing the last couple of matches is a totally different level than he's played his entire career. He is finding and making space for himself. He's taking shots that he hadn't been taking all season long. He's a different player right now, and it's the confidence that he's got right now, and it shows. And Blues fan says he remembers when Francisco dismissed Morrow in June.
He says he remembers Cisco. He remembers.
Hashtag never forget.
And no, you guys are right. I mean, to be fair to Cisco, and I got to say this, to be fair to Cisco, at that point, Morrow had not shown a whole lot. He did have a decent half of a season last year, but putting the whole team on his shoulders from an attack standpoint, or at least the tip of the spear on his shoulders, was a pretty big ask for a young player like Morrow. But I think even Cisco has to admit at this point that Morrow has definitely taken that role and basically laid siege to it. And he said to Pena, "Hey, you want it, come get it," and he's not letting it go without a fight. So I think that's a good thing. From our perspective as Dynamo fans, that's the best we could ask for. You can't ask for more than just competition at that position. And don't get me wrong, Pena's no slouch. The kid just got called up to the Venezuelan national team, senior national team, not the youth, but the senior national team. So he's definitely shown something to someone in Venezuela in their system to say that the kid deserves a call-up. So that's pretty cool. And to think that we have Morrow and Pena, in our squad, even if they don't start at the same time, but just the ability to swap them out, and they both bring different things to the match. I think different things to the tactics. But yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and cut here, and by cut I mean go to break, so that we can go ahead and get Hal on the line, so that we can talk some NWSL and women's soccer. I know that a few of you may tune out at that point. But you guys do want to tune in. Hal is just freaking amazing, and there's nobody like Hal that I've had the pleasure of I'm not even sure what I should say here. Pleasure of podcasting with, broadcasting with, whatever. I don't know. Pleasure of working with for sure. But we'll be back in about 3 minutes with Hal Kaiser on the line. Thanks, guys.
It's a mouse.
Hey guys, are you good?
Yeah,
Are
I'm
we
good.
Unmuted. Okay. Hey guys, welcome back to Generation Orange, a Houston Internet soccer show and podcast. Hopefully very soon. Shifty eyes. We have on the line with us super special guest. I know he's probably like whatever. Super special guest. I guess are you technically former writer for Keeper Notes? Or are you still Keeper Notes? How?
I'm technically I pop up from time to time, but I suppose I'm technically retired. I unretire, every few months for a little bit, and then I crawl back into my hole.
When you get that itch to write a little bit or to do a little cover work, and then you're like, all right, I've had enough. One article or two articles is plenty. Exactly. I'm good, thanks. Exactly, so yeah, we've got Hal Kaiser from, I'm gonna say it, from Keeper Notes. It's okay. on the line with us, and Hal and I go way back, as most of you at this point know.
Yeah, we do.
I don't even remember what year that was, Hal, but we started a podcast.
It seems like ages ago.
Oh, dude, it was a long time ago. I feel old just thinking about that.
Yeah.
But it was a while back, and moved from Dynamo Theory to Orange in the Oven, helped you guys kind of launch that into fruition, kind of taking it to the next level. And you guys had already done such great work, and Leo at that point was busting out content like nobody's business. And then we were like, hey, you know what'd be cool? We were like, hey, you know what'd be cool? Let's talk online to each other and record it and let people listen to it and see what they think. So we started a podcast.
Right.
That went on for a few months, and then unfortunately, Leo's health complications got the better of him, and he unfortunately passed away. And it was
R.I.P.
Yeah, it was so tough. And I had people asking me, are you going to start something back up? Or are you going to do something for years? And it just never felt right. It never felt, it just didn't feel like it was meant to be at that point. And then this kind of came out of nowhere, and the Peel stuff happened, and I don't know if you remember, I reached out to you and I was like, hey, how do you feel about me kind of pulling the name in and using the name Generation Orange as part of this, as kind of a tribute to Leo, and as a chance to kind of resurrect something that I feel like, had some definite possibility. And you were like, man, go for it. And so we've been running with it ever since. So there's the synopsis of how I know Hal. Actually, I knew Hal well before that. Hal and I discussed frequently on Dynamo Theory, mini Dynamo things constantly. And I don't know how often I tried to prod you into writing for Dynamo Theory, and you're like, nah, I can't do it. And then all of a sudden you're popping up writing for Fansided. I see how it goes. But in all seriousness,
it was.
Go ahead.
It was. I'm just going to say it was because you're talking about Leo. I mean, working with Leo, writing with Leo was so much fun that. For me, it was sort of the same thing, that once he passed on, it just sort of became not as much fun anymore, and that's when I kind of stepped away a little bit.
Absolutely. It was, it was hard. It was, and a lot of it was the emotion and the personal connection, and just, I would find myself, even when doing like the Peel, when we first were doing it, I'd find myself waiting for Leo to say something. And realizing that's not happening, But let's not go down that path. Let's
I know.
Let's go from that depression to the depression known as the Houston Dash, who still have not made the playoffs in 4 seasons of NWSL play. No, 5 seasons now. 5 seasons of NWSL
5
play.
Seasons, yeah.
And they no longer have a head coach. Vera Poe has decided, or the team have decided, that she's no longer going to be head coach. I don't know which one decided it, and I honestly don't care. So they're obviously looking for a coach. I don't even know where to really begin. They made some moves this season that I felt were actually some decent, good moves that made some impact on the pitch. They, early in the offseason they traded, or not early, in the offseason they traded away Carly Lloyd and Morgan Bryan and got nothing in return. They got Kristen Press's rights, which lasted a whole month and a half or 2 months or something, and then they got some nice job with the caps lock there, Edson. They got a couple of other pieces, and then ultimately ended up getting Sofia Huerta, which I think made a huge difference. They picked up some other players via trade, and for all that they lost, I think at the end of the season, looking back at it. At this point, they've probably gained some of what they've lost. Losing Carly obviously was a huge loss, but and ultimately losing Kristen Press was just as huge. But getting players that actually want to be here and actually want to play here, I think that goes a lot farther than having one of those quote-unquote superstars on the team. So I wanted to get your take on the season, Hal, your take kind of on the current roster, the lineup, if you will, and your take on the coaching vacancy and what that may look like in 2019.
Yeah, I think you put it well. I mean, it was, if you go back to the off season, it was legitimately one of the worst off seasons in the history of this league, certainly, and perhaps soccer. I mean, you can go back through all the different moves that they made, and none of it really was good. But the flip side is once they got into the season and they started to figure out that the team they put together was a mess, they probably had from there the best season they've had from a transactional standpoint of any season. I mean, they're not known as good traders. In fact, they're with Boston gone, they're probably generally viewed as the worst in the league at doing deals. But they added Alicia Chapman. Sure, they could have gotten her in the off season for free, but hey, at least they got her.
Absolutely.
Sophia Huerta and Taylor Como were a very good pickup. Is in some ways maybe even better than Kristen Pressman, because I think you're right. You really don't want to have a player who doesn't want to be here. And that's coming off of a couple of years of Carly Lloyd. Since they sort of dodged a bullet with Kristen Press, it would have been better. It would not have been. It's better that she didn't show up, and they were able to do a deal to get in players that wanted to be here and contributed. Than she showed up and wasn't happy to be here and disrupted things. And then they signed Claire Polkinghorn, who hopefully going forward with Amber Brooks could turn out to be the best center back pairing that they've had in the history of the team.
Yeah.
So I think they did a lot of good things during the season that positioned them pretty well for next year. And now with coaching change, I think the odds that they keep that core intact are pretty good. And then Chrissy Mewis comes back into the fold as well. So
does she?
Yeah, but once she does, she's back in and a part of the team.
Yeah,
so,
they put if I remember correctly, they put an offer to her. She just hasn't accepted it yet, or at least it hasn't been announced that she's accepted it yet. That's where that
came from. The way these things work, when the end of the season comes, you have a deadline by which you have to every player in the league is either in an option year or out of contract at any given point in time. And so the options you have to pick up by a certain deadline, which was last Friday. And the players that are out of contract, you have until last Friday to make them a contract offer. And if you didn't do that, then they ended up in the reentry wire that was released yesterday. So they've made offers, and then traditionally what happens is a lot of those players don't actually sign the contracts until later this summer. But by virtue of making that offer by last Friday, you keep their rights.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether they accept the contract or not, you have their NWSL rights.
So, speaking of contracts, speaking of NWSL in general,
in decisions, I mean, I think push things forward was the issue around the North Carolina hosted playoff game, where you had the hurricane rolling up, and it was clear to everybody that the safest thing to do was to have it moved, and the decision was postponed. And for expansion, it's not good. There's a number of reasons why you would want to have a commissioner, and I honestly don't understand what's going on there.
I mean, it's NWSL, so I'm not really all that surprised, to be honest.
You can't really see an effort by the NWSL in trying to even or get some information out there that says that they are looking for a commissioner.
Technically, wouldn't that come from a commissioner if they were? Just kidding. It just kind of feels like that sometimes. Like, oh yeah, the commissioner would be the one to put this press release out. And it's like, yeah, the commissioner. We don't have a commissioner.
Or U.S. Soccer. I mean,
that's the big
soccer
one
as well of the league. I mean,
so let me ask you a question tied to that, Hal. How do you feel that Carlos Cordero is doing enough to support women's soccer with all that he went around banging the drum for women's soccer, and that there was going to be equality in pay, and he was going to do everything he could to improve playing conditions and this, that, and the other. Do you feel that at this point, I mean, we're a year, give or take, in, coming close to it at least. Do you feel he's done enough, and or was he just blowing smoke up everybody's what?
So far, no, I don't think he has. But in his defense, or I guess in his defense, maybe isn't the right thing to say. But I think you can say the same thing on the men's side. I mean, the fact that there's still no coach in place, nobody apparently has been interviewed. I mean, there just doesn't seem to be much going on there. I don't know what's going on in U.S. soccer right now.
No, and I mean, let's be honest, and we're going to talk about this with Phil coming up here in just a few minutes, but you look at kind of the U.S. men's national team situation with them not having a coach for now, how long they've not had a coach, and I mean, they sat there for a while. They didn't even have a GM because they were, they said we're going to have a GM, and it took how long for them to get one? So, there's a lot of.
And you have the same thing going on the women's side as well. I mean, getting people in place that are going to oversee things. But I mean, you're right on the U.S. I mean, there's teams that have been through 2 coaches in the time since the U.S. fired their coach, and still don't have one.
Yep. Enough about the depressing side of things. So let's talk about the NWSL final. The absolute smackdown that North Carolina put to Portland, in Portland no less. And to be honest, from about 15 minutes on, I don't think I ever felt like Portland had much of a chance. North Carolina, and like they did all season, they just they owned the match. And I wanted to get your kind of thoughts on that, and your kind of thoughts on the makeup of North Carolina being a team that, they've got a few really good players, but most of the team is constructed around the real concept of kind of team play versus one individual kind of being that center star player.
Yeah, they've. I mean, I agree with you. It was pretty one-sided match. But to your point, I mean, how they were built, and I think this is something for teams, particularly the Dash, is one team to look at and say, how do we emulate what North Carolina's managed to do? Because going back to Western New York, when they were Western New York, they've got 2 championships now. They've been consistently very good for the last several years. And they went through a process where year 1, they were in the final. Year 2, they weren't very good, and they gutted the whole thing, rebuilt, and then here they are. And, they hired, coming out of that, going into that rebuild, they hired a very best drafts in the history of the league in 2015.
Yeah.
Where they got Abby Dahlkemper, they got Sam Ewis, they got Williams, Lynn Williams, they got Sabrina D'Angelo. I mean, it was a steal. I mean, that was the beginning of the building blocks for them, and picked up a lot of other players to go with that. And then when they moved to North Carolina, sort of transitioned into, even before they moved to North Carolina, sort of transitioned into Paul Riley taking over the reins. And again, somebody who's very experienced in soccer, knows he picked her up. Denise O'Sullivan was voted is pretty impressive. And, she started the last 2 NWSL championship games, getting Jessica McDonald from the Dash. And look what she's done for them. They've been so good. They've used that knowledge and that expertise to pull together all these different pieces and fit them together the right way. And to compare and contrast with the Dash, you've never had that kind of experience or expertise running the Dash, be it the coaching staff or be it the GM level, and consequently, as I said earlier, I mean, they've been one of the worst in the league at making deals and putting a roster together. They did a better job this year. But, it tells you you really need to have somebody that has tremendous experience in the U.S. system somewhere, whether it's at the coaching level or the GM level, technical director level. And they've never really had that to date.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. I mean, the initial GM, if you will, director of operations, I don't know what they, president, I don't remember what they called him. Brian Ching, zero experience in women's soccer, zero experience in the front office in general, let alone MLS or otherwise, and handed the reins to the team and expected to learn it all on the fly. That's not easy. There's a lot of rules and regulations and things to kind of wade through and figure out. And for someone on the other side of the fence that doesn't really dive into that stuff all that often, it can be extremely overwhelming. And so I found that interesting. And then watching how the teams progress the last 4 seasons,
it doesn't surprise me the struggles that they've had if you take that into context. That, like you said, I mean, it's hard to build a good team when you can't really trade for the pieces that you really need to trade for, or when you do trade for them, you're giving up half your team to do it, or you're giving up 2 or 3 of your best players and draft picks that are extremely valuable. And it's just it's a rabbit hole that unfortunately it's a snowball effect that just continues on and on and on. And I think the kind of second half of the season was kind of the turnaround where you're starting to see some competency coming out of the front office in terms of the transactions that are taking place, in terms of not even just the play on the field, but in terms of how players are kind of approaching various things and the makeup of the team and the makeup of the roster and the players that you're bringing in, their kind of mindsets as they're coming in. It just seems like it seems like the front office has figured it out, or someone has kind of clued them in. I'm not sure which. Hal, if that's you, you can feel free to share that on the air. Nobody listens anyways.
Yeah, and I mean, so Brian's still the GM, and I don't, I love Brian, and I'm not saying anything to denigrate him. It was unfair.
It was completely 100%.
It was unfair for him to be put in that position, walking right off the pitch with a lifetime of experience in the men's game, no experience in the women's game, no experience running a team, and here you are, you're the GM of a women's team. I mean,
yeah,
he did the best he could, but you still have these issues to a certain extent. It's sort of, I don't know where to put the credit for the midseason transactions. I suspect. I mean, I know what happened in the off season.
Mm-hmm.
I suspect once you hit the middle of the season, Vera started to figure out. She started to figure out the mistakes that were made in the off season and where she needed to strengthen the team, and things sort of fell into place. I mean, does that continue into this next season? I think a lot of that will depend on who the head coach is next season and how experienced they are.
Yeah. Well, hopefully there's a good experienced NWSL coach out there. I don't, I think
to come.
I mean, at this point, I don't,
So
it is what it is.
Going on with that question, what do you think would be the best timeline, or the one you would say, oh, okay, this is a standard where we can say that the front office is doing good in regards to what day do you think they should be hiring the new coach?
Good question. I mean, last year they cut it pretty close to the draft. I think you would really ideally like to have someone in place by the end of this month, and so that you're actually making. I mean, there was a lot of coming into January of last year. There was a lot of catch up. There was a lot of going back and undoing things that were already done because the coach wasn't a part of decisions that were made at the end of last season. By the end of this month would be ideal. And I think if they're smart, and I believe they're doing this, what you will do is this time around you'll engage the players, the key players, in providing input as to which coaches they should consider or what criteria they need to consider, so that you get buy-in from the players, both from the standpoint of keeping them engaged and committed to the team for next year, but also if the players are playing a key role in determining the next coach. If you get the third coach in a row where the coach has lost the locker room, like you did with Randy, and actually 3. I mean, Omar never really had the locker room, but Randy, Omar, and Vera. I mean, if the players are a part of choosing the next coach, and he or she loses the locker room, then the players are at fault at that point. I mean, there's no longer any pointing fingers at the organization. The players are right there, arm in arm in that decision. So I mean, after the last 2 coaches, what they've gone through, last 3, if they're not involving the players, especially the experience level they have now in this team, in these decisions, it's poor decision making on their part.
I think that's fair. I think that's very fair.
I just think it's troubling when you put it that way, how that the players or that the previous 2 coaches lost the locker room, And like you say, if with this next coach the same thing happens, I mean, then this is more of an ego kind of problem from the players rather than bad decisions by the front office.
I mean, not necessarily. Again, you go back to the level of experience in the organization and making these decisions. I mean, Vera, I don't want to, I mean, I've already said a lot about Vera in the past. I don't want to say anything negative more about her at this point. I mean, it's over, it's done. But, I mean, they didn't know who she was. I mean, that was an Anson Dorrance recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they would have never found her on their own. They didn't really know anything about her. They went on Anson Dorrance's word and had an interview, and and away they went. So there needs to be a little bit more experience and thoughtfulness involved in making these decisions. And I think that was an unfortunate. It was unfortunate the way that it turned out. It could have turned out well. It was a little bit like the Owen Coyle thing on the Dynamo side. I mean, it was a risk that just didn't pan out. And fortunately, this time it only lasted a year as opposed to Owen Coyle being a year and a half. I mean,
preach on.
2 years, whatever Owen Coyle was.
Preach on.
So hopefully, like I said, if they get people that have a little more experience, and let's be honest, I mean, a lot of these players have a lot more experience than the people in the front office on this stuff. So if they get the experience, use the experience that's around them, and make the right choice, then the players are all professional. I mean, there's nobody there. In the past, there's been people who are egos and problematic or whatnot. I can tell you, the people I know, there's none of that there.
Yeah.
They're all professional. They all want to win. They're all committed. So you get the right candidate in there, and they can easily build off of this year and shoot for the playoffs next year.
Well, I mean, and I think there's something to take away from this season too. The second half of the season, knowing the changes that had to be made, the transactions that were made, even if you exclude all that, and just look at the team on the whole and how they improved their play. And they did it, also that you have a maturity on the team now that with, it doesn't even have to necessarily be the quote unquote right coach, because I don't think there's necessarily a whole lot of those available, to be totally honest with you.
Right.
But I think a coach that has, like you said, NWSL experience, helping to improve players' play on the pitch, and somebody that understands the way that the league works. I think those three things really, and understands how to kind of manage some of the egos, because you're going to have that regardless. But, those three or four things, I don't know if it really matters specifically which coach you get, because the team has proven they can win in spite of whoever it is at the helm. And, that has to be a positive, right?
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head with the experience. And if you go back to 2015, which I still maintain was the best, a lot of issues within the team. Carly Lloyd is not a leader,
no,
but she casts a long shadow.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, one of the best things that happened to this team this year was her being gone.
Yep.
And so, she was out, and the likes of Kaylia and Amber Brooks and Rachel Daly, who were already becoming leaders and had been for a few years, now it was fully their team.
Absolutely.
There was no Carl. There was no big name, ego, whatever you want to call it, like a Carly Lloyd around. It's 100% their team, and that makes a really big difference, and that continues into next year.
Yeah, and like you said, there's no shadow to hide behind at that point. You're the one front and center now. Right. It's your team. Prove it, and let's be honest, they did. Right. I mean, it took them a while to figure it out, but they did. They took over and said, look, we are the leaders of this team, and we're gonna take the team, and we're gonna do with it what needs to be done. And I think, like I said, I think that bodes well for next season. I'm hoping that, like you said, that within the next month or so we hear something about the next coach, and I hope that it's a coach with NWSL experience, not just somebody that has just a few, couple of years of international experience, and even that is, not necessarily an impressive resume, or somebody who's coming from the college ranks who doesn't have any NWSL experience. I think it's important that the next coach does have NWSL experience, and I'm hopeful that there's at least one or two coaches out there that the Dash could at least approach and talk to, and hopefully they're already having those conversations. I mean, at this point in the off season, if they've not had those conversations yet, then I think that's the point, that you got to start asking real questions of the front office, and you know.
Absolutely.
So, anyways, Hal, we got to let you go because we got to get Phil on. But where can everybody find you on Twitter and eventually find your random, every once in a while when the blue moon decides to appear, articles? Where can they find you?
So Twitter is at Hal, was it _ Kaiser, Kaiser.
Yep.
And then the Keeper Notes site isn't up at the moment. The last few things I've written though have been Equalizer Soccer. So
gotcha.
Whatever Equalizer Soccer's website is, I don't recall. But one of those, between KeeperNotes.com and Equalizer, I'll keep popping up every now and then.
Excellent. Well, Hal, thanks again for coming on. We really do appreciate it. And you know, I said it before you came on. There's really nobody quite like Hal out there, whether good or bad. I'm not going to say. I'll let you figure out from there what I mean by that. But there really isn't anybody like you, Hal, and we appreciate you coming on. And you know, who knows? Hopefully, we can have you on a couple more times next season, or maybe as the season gets closer. Maybe once they have a coach, and we can actually start talking.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Real things.
I think I'll have some positive things to say next. I didn't have a lot of positive things to say this year. I think I'll have positive things to say next.
That's the hope, right? That we get to a point where we got some positives to say. Well, again, Hal, thanks very much, Absolutely. And you have a good one, sir.
Yeah, thanks. My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you. Bye.
So we're going to go to break, guys, for just a couple of minutes. We may need to call Phil. I don't think he... Anyways, we'll work that out in the break. But we'll be on for just a couple minutes. We'll be right back, and we'll have Phil West on. Thanks, guys, for listening.
And welcome back to Generation Orange, a Houston soccer online show.
You butchered that so hardcore. You're listening to Generation Orange, a Houston internet soccer show and podcast.
Oh, I missed a word. I missed a word.
I don't know what you even said anymore. Anyways, so we are incredibly thankful and grateful to have the opportunity to have Phil West, a writing professor at UTSA, a writer for MLS and Pro Soccer USA, and the author of 2 books on soccer from the Overlook Press. Is one of those books, Phil, is one of those books the one about the U.S. men's national team and the road to U.S. men's victory in the World Cup?
Yep, I believe that we won, which put out in May, I believe. Came out of this year.
That's fantastic. You guys can go check that out on Amazon. We don't get any credit for this, just so everybody knows. We're not trying to pimp out his stuff because he's coming on. Legit, you can't get better than that title. And Phil is just such an incredibly knowledgeable individual. He's in a lot of different soccer circles, and we really are. I can't even express in words how grateful I am to have Phil on. So Phil, thanks for coming on for sure.
So nice. Thanks.
Absolutely.
For sure.
So we're going to dive right into it, only because we've only technically got you scheduled for 30 minutes, but if we go over, we go over. That's how we work around here.
Okay.
So first question for you. I know you watched the Open Cup final.
I was there.
Okay, even better. So first of all, okay, now I'm gonna do a question we didn't plan to do. How did you feel the atmosphere from the Dynamo standpoint as Dynamo fans? How do you feel that atmosphere measures up to other MLS atmospheres, excluding the kind of top elite atmospheres like your Atlanta and your Seattle and Portland? You know, exclusionary of those. How do you feel that Dynamo fan atmosphere for U.S. Open Cup final measures up?
Well, I mean, I think El Batallon makes it unique. Still, I really like their contributions. I really like what they do. You know, obviously, it would have been nice to see more fans in there. I mean, the fans that were there seemed like they were pretty energized. They seemed like they were, you know, pretty into things. But yeah, I mean, I definitely, you know, obviously, they're not the worst crowd in the league, I would say. But yeah, like you're saying, I mean, there's also obviously you have Atlanta, you have Seattle, you have Portland, I mean, you have, you know, I would say even like the Red Bulls definitely have the and aside from El Batallon, I mean, they were a crowd. They were energized. They were, you know, definitely cheering goals. They were definitely, you know, kind of on edge during some of the moments of the match. But you know, it would be nice to see that evolve still. I mean, obviously, there's still probably some growing that the fans can do.
For sure, absolutely. I think that's absolutely fair. So following along that same lines, you know, the reported attendance was around 16K. And I'm not quite sure I can buy into that being actually 16K, but it did look like a reasonably decent turnout. Not a great turnout, but a decent turnout. Right. To you, is 16K for a U.S. Open Cup final, given the current state of MLS and the current state of U.S. soccer, is that an acceptable turnout?
I think because with U.S. Open Cup being a weeknight, being a Wednesday night, I mean, that's, yeah, I don't know. I feel like this is a championship that should be on a weekend. It should be something to try to maximize the audience. You know, putting it into a Wednesday night, you know, obviously your hardcore fans are going to come out, but it's really tough for people who have, you know, just kind of normal weekday obligations to do it. And frankly, I mean, again, yeah, I mean, this has been a debate. I mean, I've talked to a few soccer friends about this quite a bit in the last year, just kind of this idea of, you know, should the U.S. Open Cup be something more, right? Should there be sponsors? Should it be something where they really try to pump it up? I mean, it doesn't seem like they quite do that, right? So you have, in some cases, you have some lower division teams that really kind of struggle even to get to their games against, you know, some of their opponents. You know, if you have a team that is, you know, fairly small and doesn't have that much travel budget, and all of a sudden you're making them travel to, you know, Philadelphia or DC or whatever to play against a Union or United. You know, I think it's really tough because you have this bar at one end. The stadium looks emptier because you do have people that congregate around there. I mean, it's not a ton. I don't think it's as dramatic in Houston as it is in San Jose, but I certainly do think that's a factor. You know, and again, it's tough, especially when you see it on TV and you see a bunch of empty seats, but I think part of that is just kind of the dynamic. And also, I noticed there were kind of a lot of late fans getting there as well, right? So the stadium was definitely fuller in the second half, say, than it was at kickoff.
Absolutely. Well, and I'm not to necessarily defend Houston fans, but I feel like it's an obligation I have to undertake. One of the biggest issues I think that surrounds Dynamo from a fan standpoint is traffic. And, it can be difficult to get there when people get off work at 5 o'clock to get there at 7 o'clock, given the state of Houston traffic, when most people live out in the, you know, distant suburbs. And it takes an hour and a half, 2 hours just to drive into downtown during the heart of traffic. And then not only that, but to get there on time. And, you know, most people have kids and you know, there's just a lot of layers to that onion. I think that you know, and I don't think the Dynamo are the only one that suffer from that. I think you called it out that, you know, the Open Cup is a tournament that deserves to be elevated more than it currently is, in my opinion. My opinion.
Right.
And I think you hit the nail on the head. I think the way you start to do that is you turn this into more of a weekend, you know, thing. Turn it into an event. As opposed to just another match, just another final that happens. You know, if you turn it into an event, you know, it doesn't have to be the Super Bowl. It doesn't have to be necessarily MLS Cup final or MLS All-Star week, week. But, you know, you turn it into a weekend event. You know, maybe you have a chance for, you know, various things to take place on Saturday and then maybe play the match on an early midday Sunday or something. And I just think that you it is the responsibility of U.S. soccer to elevate the tournament, not the fans, not MLS, not USL. Nobody else. It falls to U.S. soccer, and I think honestly, I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of MLS teams, at least in the early stages of the tournament, don't necessarily quote unquote take it as seriously, because U.S. soccer doesn't seem to take it as seriously. And so it's a lot harder to take it seriously as a club, I guess, when the organization telling you to take it seriously is not even taking it seriously.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think the one thing though, I mean, that I think was interesting just in kind of terms of the timing this year, is the Dynamo know that pretty much they're out of the playoffs. I mean, obviously there's a slim hope, there's a mathematical chance, they're still going to keep trying for it, but essentially this is their championship, and it happens late enough in the season where it is meaningful, and they won, and there's definitely, I think, some positive signs pointing towards next year. And I guess we'll get probably in a minute here to some of the actual kind of in-game stuff and some of the things that tactically y'all might have noticed and I might have noticed. But I mean, I think there's hope for next year. I mean, I definitely, think this has been a really weird season for the Dynamo, but having this U.S. Open Cup final win, I think, is a positive. I mean, I don't think it's just a throwaway. I mean, I think it does actually mean something. I mean, certainly seeing the players in the locker room afterwards. I talked to Beasley quite a bit. He was saying that this does not save our season. We've had a bad season, but he felt really genuinely happy for everybody involved to have won this.
For sure.
That it is something that's meaningful. It's not just, we won a game against the United on Wednesday night. It's something more than that.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. So speaking of the Open Cup, in my opinion, and I think Edson feels the same way, the Dynamo came out with an intent to pin back Philadelphia in the final, and in my opinion, from what I saw, it did work. What other things did you happen to see in the final that explains how Philly, a team that was in absolutely superb form leading into Open Cup final, looked so inept and so incapable against a very game Houston Dynamo, a team that, up until the final, really, their form had been piss poor, to put it lightly.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think part of it was just, kind of what the Union had done immediately going into it. I mean, they played Seattle, they played SKC, two really tough games and won both of those. And then all of a sudden, you're traveling to a final. It's on a Wednesday. It's in Houston. It's 147% humidity. It's ridiculous out. And I think part of it was just that, but I think also just that the Dynamo were so willing to kind of take the game to the Union in the early going. And I think there's a few different things. I mean, I think defensively, Beasley played out of his mind. It was incredible. And I think a lot of that has to do with Cabezas. When he's in there, I think the back four gets a lot more cover. I mean, again, this is a team that can field a back four that is a combination 130 years old, right? I mean, it's it's an older back line, and obviously, there's been some struggles there. And if they need to build a team, they probably, towards next year, especially thinking about now CONCACAF Champions League in the mix, they probably do need to think about the back line and what they're going to do there. But I think this back line with Cabezas in front of it is exponentially better than that back line by itself with anybody else that they've been able to try to, plug into that sixth role.
Absolutely.
And then just the other thing was just the wing play. I mean, just seeing Elise pushing things, just seeing Kyoto pushing things. And Manotas, I mean, obviously is in the middle of an incredible hot streak and did really well, and probably deserved player of the match honors, but certainly those pieces around him, with Cabezas being able to win balls, get those tackles, and then push the ball up on the wings and see them use the speed on the counter. I mean, it's incredibly effective when it works, and it absolutely worked on Wednesday.
Absolutely, no, and I agree with you, and that one right there. I just wanted you to see that because I thought you'd appreciate that. That's pretty cool. Sorry, Phil. Sorry, Edson I had to show him something on Twitter. Okay, so speaking of kind of the Dynamo, and so okay, I'm going to say this because I think there's a lot of Houston fans, quote unquote fans, that need to hear this. I think you hit the nail on the head when you said the back line, the defense is significantly different with Cabezas immediately in front of them. And I think there's no question of that when you look at how they played last season versus how they played without him, and then how they played in the final with him. I think it's just an unquestionable thing at this point that we can point to. So with that being said, with all the pieces that are currently there for the Dynamo, and you mentioned, maybe they need to go out and get some younger guys in the back line to help deal with the age and injury issues. In terms of the CONCACAF Champions League, which now the Dynamo have qualified for in 2019, do you think the Dynamo stand a better chance than Philly would have, especially given the new format which eliminates group play?
Wow. That's hard to say. I mean, I've seen Philly here and there this year. I mean, I haven't followed them as closely as I followed Dynamo, so I don't know comparatively kind of how they do. But yeah, I mean, I think so. And I think a lot of that too, I mean, just kind of figuring who they're going to play and just kind of given, Elise and Kyoto and their experience with the Honduran national team and having played a lot of these same players in CONCACAF. I mean, I think just a lot of that familiarity is going to help to a certain degree, maybe more so than who the Union fields. I mean, again, the Union still has an incredibly young team, right? So, I mean, obviously a lot of the key players, for the Dynamo, like Elise and Manotas, are not so old, but they're definitely, a couple of years more mature than a lot of the players, especially in the back line, that you can rely on. So, I mean, I think just kind of improvements to see if, again, one of these teams could actually win it. I mean, I still think Atlanta in CCL will be a lot of fun. Just kind of seeing what that offense will do. But I mean, I think Houston will show fairly well. I mean, I don't necessarily favor them right now to win the whole thing, but I don't think that they're going to completely fall on their faces either. I mean, I think that there's definitely a possibility for them to make some noise in the tournament.
For sure, and that's to be honest, don't get me wrong. If they win, if they go out and win CCL, I'm not going to complain. But if they go out and just have a good showing and are competitive throughout, I mean, that's really all I'm looking for. I'm not looking for them to go out and win it. If they, like I said, if they go out and win it, hey, I'm not going to argue or complain. That's amazing. But it is a very tough tournament. I do think the format change does change things quite dramatically, just from the aspect of how teams are going to approach it, because now it's just elimination from basically from the get-go. And I think that just changes the tactical approach. It doesn't span as long of the season as it did in previous years, which is also a lot better because you don't have the group play. And so I think that will help MLS teams. However, on the flip side of that, it's still MLS preseason when they're starting this thing. Really, it's like almost the very, very start of preseason. So it'll be interesting to see how comfortable players like Elise and Kyoto and Morrow and Cabezas are at that stage of quote unquote really what is their off season, how ready and how game they can make themselves for that level of play without having a whole lot of run up to it in terms of preseason and getting ready from a league play standpoint, because the Liga MX teams, they're in mid season at that point. They've been playing for a while at that point, and same thing with most of the other teams that are in there. So that'll be interesting. I think that'll be interesting.
Yeah, what you don't want to see, obviously, is you don't want to see a situation.
But you, by the way, really, people should go get that book. Get it on Amazon. Go read it on Amazon on your Kindle or whatever other e-reader you have, or you're on your phone. Just go read it. It is a great read. But let me ask you a question. Do you feel like the U.S. men's national team, they just switched to this format where they're going to have a GM and they're going to have a coach. Do you feel that U.S. Soccer really made the right decision in that? And along the same lines, what is the role of a GM versus the role of a coach? And here's another question for you as well, tied to that. Where does the accountability for what happens with the men's national team, and from your perspective at least, those types of things?
Yeah, I mean, I think accountability is multifaceted. I mean, certainly you saw with the elections too, and just kind of the noise around the elections this past year. I mean, a lot of it is kind of on the federation, right? Just kind of thinking about the whole of U.S. soccer and the direction that it's going. I mean, I think in theory, a GM is helpful just so you kind of avoid. I mean, again, I think a lot of that was engendered by Klinsmann, trying to essentially kind of do both and put his stamp on the team, and that becomes maybe too much of an autocracy, right? That you have too much control in the hands of one person, and I think the attempt to have both a GM and a coach is to split those duties and to be able to have conversations versus, Klinsmann looking in the mirror and saying, I'm awesome, and then going to kind of continue to do what he did and eventually sort of losing the team. So I do think that, the idea is good. And, Ernie Stewart is certainly a capable, knowledgeable soccer person. But I think still being in this holding pattern, I think, I'm glad that Serkan's doing what he's doing and that he's playing a lot of the young players and these auditions are happening and we're beginning to see, how some of these players might shape up. But again, in some of these last games, you've still had, essentially 3 defensive midfielders played, right? I know Pulisic has been out, and that's definitely kind of shaped, the team, and it's certainly kind of changed and maybe even limited what they can do. But I still don't think that the team's really being well served right now. Certainly if you have like a Berhalter or a Pareja come on or someone like that, you would definitely have a stamp, you would definitely have a philosophy, you would definitely have a way of playing that the team would start to be learning and recognizing. And I don't think with Serkan you have that necessarily. So, though I do think that it's important for these younger players to get caps, and I'm glad that's happening rather than, just kind of doing a quote unquote victory tour. I guess that's maybe a bad way to put it. But certainly, having Tyler Adams, having Weston McKennie get a bunch of minutes versus, seeing, Kyle Beckerman and, Michael Bradley getting a bunch of minutes, I think is good and forward looking towards 2022 and 2026. But, I would much rather, and I think a lot of my fellow U.S. fans feel this way too, that we would much rather see somebody in there who is instituting a philosophy and a style of play that is pointed towards qualification in 2021.
For sure. And I think, I definitely feel like the amount of youth being played right now needs to continue. I do think Weston McKennie, and although, knee injury notwithstanding, Weston McKennie and like I said, Tyler Adams and for all the struggle that Anthony Robinson had, for all those struggles, I do think that he has something that he brings to the team that we've been lacking for a while. And
sure.
And so I hope the youth movement kind of continues, and I hope we continue to see that grow. And I do think you made a good point though as well that. I think it's time to put to rest this whole notion of victory, or not victory tours, but retirement tour, if you will. Players like Bradley and Dempsey and Dempsey not anymore, but Dempsey at that point, and and Donovan and et cetera. But not that they're playing necessarily anymore, but Bradley is obviously. But I think it's important that we get away from this notion consistent basis because. The World Cup is only every 4 years, but there are competitions between the World Cup and, your qualifiers and everything else that you need to get prepared for. And I just feel like if you're not focusing on your youth and you're not focusing on the talent that is available and trying to develop that into a winning World Cup squad over the entire 4-year cycle, that you're just missing too many opportunities. And so I think that's got to be one of the big focuses moving forward is, hey, if you've been a player that's played here for, 10, 15 years on the team, then all the more power to you, but don't expect us to give you anything on the way out. We'll have a, celebration in your honor, but that doesn't mean you're going to play or start type thing,
Right, and that's not to say that someone like Michael Bradley, for example, doesn't have a role on the team in 2022 because he certainly might. And I still think that Michael Bradley in about 10 to 15 years is going to be an amazing U.S. men's national team head coach. I think he's wired that way, and I think that he provides a lot of leadership and a lot of insight, and I think that he could be helpful on a squad in the way that maybe Landon Donovan would have been in 2014, right? So, but by the same token, I think it's much more important for Anthony Robinson to get burned on a play in 2018 versus getting burned on that same play in 2021 when we're we're like a few minutes from trying to close out a game against Costa Rica or Mexico, right? So we definitely need to have those younger players get the reps, make the mistakes, and accumulate that experience so we can have kind of the most cohesive team possible when we get into, again, qualifying for 2022. I don't think it's going to be easy.
By no stretch of the imagination. It's not going to be an easy qualifying group, no matter what.
So, in your opinion, who do you think deserves the shot at the U.S. men's national team coaching role, and who do you think would actually fill that role best?
I mean, that's interesting. I mean, I think there's a couple different directions. I mean, certainly I think in terms of kind of knowing U.S. soccer inside and out, I mean, I thought that Chad Ramos might be a good candidate, and I thought that he might be kind of interesting actually as an interim coach rather than Sarachan. I'm kind of leaning Berhalter right now. I mean, I think, you know, what he's been able to do with Columbus has been pretty incredible. You've got, again, a team that is playing cohesively as a team, maybe more than, you know, any of the MLS teams right now, just kind of given where their talent is. They're just kind of given the makeup. I mean, I think in seeing kind of their strengths and seeing what they can offer and putting that together into a configuration that works weak in the U.S. Just to avoid that. But I certainly think that he's kind of an interesting option. I mean, there's definitely, this does kind of boggle the mind now, like why is it taking until now?
Absolutely.
And certainly, yeah, I mean, I think now if you are going to go with a MLS candidate, which I think is probably where they're headed, then you need to at least kind of get through the regular season, kind of see where things line up, right? So, and in the meantime, that's tough because you've got a bunch of these friendlies against top international teams, you know, coming up in the next couple of months, and it'd be nice again to see a system being instituted and a philosophy being instituted. But certainly, I mean, I think there are candidates there. I mean, I'm not as down on some of the candidates as maybe some other people are. I don't think that the U.S. necessarily needs to look to Europe for a coach. I don't think, you know, David Moyes or Jose Mourinho, for example, are necessarily the answers. I think, prefer to have someone that's got at least some familiarity with American players, be it, you know, American or be it, you know, at least coaching in MLS. But I would like to see that happen by the end of the year so we can institute a plan and have a philosophy and have players learn that.
Absolutely. I can't stress enough how important it is to get a coach in really as soon as possible. You know, obviously you want to go through the vetting process, but at the same time, you don't want to drag your feet because, one, you're losing out on candidates that may be going elsewhere, but also, two, you have to give that coach time to instill, like you said, his philosophy, his tactical approach. He needs time to gel with the players just as much as the players need time to gel with him.
Right.
So, all right.
And the other thing, there's one more thing, which is there's kind of a recruiting thing happening right now, too, with, like, you know, for example, like an Efrain Alvarez. You know, if you want to make a case to him that he should pick the U.S. over Mexico, and you say, oh, yeah, we've got, you know, Sarachan, it's kind of this interim coach floating around for a while, that's not going to look as appealing as if Mexico says, yeah, we're about to hire Tata.
Exactly.
With what he's done with Atlanta.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
you lose out on the young talent.
Sorry?
I mean, you lose out on the young talent, and you lose. I mean, you know, because parents do hold some sway over their kids' decisions, and I mean, you know, it can have a bit of a ripple effect. And I mean, we saw it with
Jonathan.
Gonzalez. Thank you. That's exactly Jonathan Gonzalez just last year or earlier this year, and you know, we can't as the U.S. right now with the lack of domestic talent pool growth. We really can't afford to lose those types of players that are dual nationals and have the opportunity to go elsewhere. We really can't. And so, okay, enough about the men's national team.
It was definitely January because, like half the chapter of one of my books was about Gonzalez. So I had to do a bunch of rewrites, like right as he was making it switch.
He made you change
so
everything.
That very, very well.
Yeah, I'm sure your editors were like, oh, awesome. The last minute writing is never the way to write a book, by the way, if anybody's ever wondering. So, okay, a couple of quick questions for you related to Austin FC and the whole move the crew movement and don't move the crew movement and save the crew movement. First question to you, and it's a really simple question, but how close to reality, based on what you know and who you talk to, and especially where you are, how close to reality is Austin FC?
Depends on the courts in Ohio. That's kind of making it Is it 2019 or is it 2020 with crew moving, or is it an expansion team in 2021? I mean, it's all really kind of hung up in the courts right now. I mean, they had the hearing, the motion to dismiss a few weeks ago. The judge hasn't come back with anything on that yet, so it's just kind of there. I mean, again, if there was a buyer in Columbus ready to go, I think we'd hear about that by now. So, assuming that that's not the case, it's just, are they going to be? It would be nice to get this figured out in 2019, but there's certainly a few things that have to get figured out here, obviously, in terms of, where are they going to play in 2019, for example,
Absolutely.
right? Because the new stadium wouldn't be ready until 2021. And, there certainly are a few options here, but, one of them is incredibly complicated because it is with a major 800-pound gorilla university that happens to be in Austin, and then other options are suburban and, certainly could work, but again, that there needs to, the more time to get ready for that, the better, certainly.
So, in your opinion, sans Ohio courts, is this basically a done deal?
Yeah, they're coming. Yeah, I mean, there's a team name, there's a brand, there's a front office that's definitely motivated to be here. Yeah, I mean, I think it's coming. I think it's just a matter of, is it the players that as the Columbus Crew coming down and reconstituting Austin FC, or is it still this expansion team that and will the Crew be allowed to stay there with whatever new ownership might emerge, right? So it's all kind of contingent on that, and just nobody ultimately, it's in the hands of the judge right now, and certainly I think there's definitely kind of behind the scenes discussions about what's going to happen kind of based on that, but that's where it kind of lies in the balance right now.
So another question for you related to that same thing. The USL in Austin just announced the Austin Bold, the USL Austin franchise. Do you believe that a USL franchise and an MLS franchise in the same city, Austin, and we'll dive a little bit more into the market there here in just a second, but do you feel that those two can not only coexist but can be both successful?
Well, that's the whole question. If they can be both successful, I mean, they're not really in the same city. I mean, the USL franchise is out at Coda, which is technically in Elroy. It's well south and well east of the city, right? So it's south and east of the airport, and the team they're putting together, I mean, it's kind of a hodgepodge. I mean, there's some older players. I mean, it's kind of interesting. And I think if they're the only game in town, then certainly I think the soccer curious among us will be there. But I think the momentum is definitely behind the MLS team. I mean, to put it this way, there was the supporters group, which was called MLS in Austin, is now called Austin Anthem, had their brand reveal over the weekend and drew 400 people out to a bar in the middle of like a UT football Saturday. So, there's definitely, I think, enthusiasm and excitement for that. And, definitely a lot of people are really excited and they just want to see that here and they want to see that happen. And certainly, ideally, there's a team in Austin, there's a team in Columbus, and the friction, hopefully stops. I mean, obviously, I think there's going to be an interesting Austin-Columbus rivalry should, that happen. But, yeah, in terms of the USL team, I mean, I eventually see that they're going to have to somehow kind of partner with MLS, and right now they seem pretty adversarial towards pre-court, towards that team. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how it plays out, right? So, but I certainly think that if there's a choice between an MLS team in North Austin, pretty close to downtown, reasonably close to downtown, versus a USL team that's out at Coda, I think that MLS is going to be the more obvious choice for people, and I think the market's going to bear that out.
Along the same lines, I mentioned we were going to ask about the market, and I think it's important. Do you think that Austin as a market, and I'll extrapolate that out to say Texas as a soccer market has been a struggle, I think, at the MLS level, and really even you look at the USL clubs as well. They don't necessarily draw fantastic numbers compared to other areas of the country. But do you think that Austin, and again, in general, Texas, can be the ripe kind of market that Precourt really needs, given all of the baggage that's coming along with the Crew?
I mean, I absolutely do. Yeah, I mean, there's a few different factors in that. I mean, one thing, I definitely think that the lack of other pro sports teams in Austin definitely positions Austin FC better than, say, either FC Dallas or the Dynamo. And then I also just think that the soccer market here, I mean, there are a lot of people that are hungry for it, and there are a lot of people that are fans from, just kind of a lot of different backgrounds. I mean, FC Dallas always runs up against, they're in Frisco. That's kind of hard to get to. And Houston just kind of perplexes me. I'm not sure why Houston doesn't draw, more fans than they do. But I mean, certainly, I think San Antonio and RGV for their markets have done well in terms of what they've drawn. I don't think that necessarily, I think Texas kind of gets a bad rap. I mean, certainly, Dallas and Houston attendance numbers compared to the rest of the league haven't necessarily helped that narrative. But I don't think that Austin is going to be just like Dallas or just like Houston. I mean, as you all know, I mean, they're three incredibly different cities, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So, I do think, certainly, UT has 6 home games a year, and there's a lot of people in Austin that have no connection to UT. And I went to grad school at UT, and I'm much more gravitated towards soccer now than I am about any college football, even including the Longhorns.
Well, hey Phil, thanks for joining us. We're gonna go ahead and let you go. We've definitely eclipsed your 30 minutes. You've been fantastic.
Yeah, I got kids to pick up, so it's probably good that you left.
Absolutely. We appreciate having you on, and we'll definitely have to get you back on as things with Austin FC kind of shake out a little bit more, and sure. when the U.S. finally name a head coach, whenever that may happen, like 2020 or something at this rate. But with that being said, Phil, where can everybody find you on social media, and also again remind everybody of your books, and then we'll finish up.
Sure, I'm Phil West on the vast morass of awfulness that is Twitter. That's probably the easiest place to find me. And then, my books, overlookpress.com, you can find them. You can find them on Amazon. So I Believe That We Will Win, and about U.S. soccer, as we talked about, and then the United States of Soccer, which is a history of MLS, which came out in 16, and then there's a revamped paperback version in 17, which is a little cheaper and a little bit more complete. So you may want to buy that one if you choose between the two.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Phil. You have a good night, sir, and we will be in touch for sure.
You too. All right. Take care.
Mm-hmm. Bye-bye. So we're going to go ahead and go on break for just a couple of minutes, and then we're going to rip Phil a new one for saying that I don't even remember what he said that I had to give a really bad look for, but
it was about Michael Bradley.
Oh, Michael Bradley being the next, being a future head coach. Oh God, we'll get into that when we get back. We're going to go to break. I need pizza. I'm hungry. We'll be back in a minute, guys. Thanks for watching and tuning in.
And we're back. You're listening to Generation Orange, the Houston Internet Soccer Show and podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Sean Ringrose, trying to get those damn headphones in my ears.
And I'm Edson Ochoa.
With over-the-ear headphones, which are way better for this sort of thing. So we had Phil on, and he is phenomenal. Phenomenal Phil. I just gave him a nickname.
You heard it here first, folks.
Phenomenal Phil. I'm going to have to tweet him that. But in all seriousness, he said a few things that got under my skin. Number one, that Michael Bradley, he could see Michael Bradley being a head coach in the future once he retires. And me personally, I cannot, because Michael Bradley has never come across to me as a coach on field or off. I know people say that he, to some extent he can, he has football intelligence, but when I watch matches where he's playing, there are times that I'm just clueless what he's trying to do, or where he's trying to, what he's trying to make happen. And maybe that's me. Maybe I just don't understand what he's trying to do. But on the flip side of it, it's because of that, it's hard for me to see him being a head coach. I just don't think that he has that mentality, the coach mentality, the tactical awareness, to do what needs to be done as a coach, and definitely not as the U.S. men's national team coach. For the love of God, no. One Bradley was enough. Two Bradleys is like death by 1,000 paper cuts. God, it's just not a good idea. So we wanted to take some questions, but I see that nobody has posted any in the chat. We were hoping to get some discussion points from y'all. I didn't really mention that earlier. That's kind of on me. Guys, I'm sorry, that's on me. I will do better. I will get better. It's on me. It's on me. We talk about this week in and week out. We train about it, and then it's on me. I don't do it. It's on me. Not on my players.
Okay, Bill.
Bob. Bill O'Brien over here. So, Edson, what you want to talk about? Let's talk something Edson wants to talk about, because his ass was falling asleep a few minutes ago. Whether he will admit it, I know it's been a long week. Work was tiring. I get it. But boy, you jumped when I slapped you, when I backhanded your knee. Talk about AJD. Oh, that's good. Thank you, Cisco, for calling that out. So AJ De La Garza came back, and number one, he looked fully fit, fully healthy. Number two, he was very good. He had a lot of good moments, not only going forward, but a lot of good moments tracking back on, defensively. I think if he were to be honest, that maybe the time in RGV was worth it. I think it got him to that game fitness and game readiness. And I think if you compare the trajectory between an AJD and a Cabezas, I think the difference is the level of rehab that Cabezas went through and how he went through his rehab. He was ready when he came back. I think AJD, AJD, no matter, what he may think personally, and, players are people, they're going to think that they can do whatever. But I think if he takes a step back, I think he understands that the time he needed a little bit of that time, maybe not the whole time necessarily, but he needed that time at RGV, and he needed a little bit of the recovery time to get back up to speed and to get ready to play a full match. And like I said, I mean, he was beautiful. From a tactical standpoint, I thought he played really, really well. He kept their left wing in check the entire match, kept their left mids in check the entire match. There were a couple times towards the end of the match that he was burned, just beat off the dribble, and it was just a weird cut or a weird angle that he just wasn't ready for. But Cabezas was there, or Elise would be there, or who did Elise get subbed off for? Was it Pena? No, Pena eventually moved into the Morrow spot. Who was Elise subbed off? No, Elise was subbed on. No, yes, Elise was subbed on. That's what it was. And so he was interchanging with Wanger on that side, very comfortably. And then when Elise came on, he was still very comfortable. And normally when we've seen, either Elise come off and Wanger come on, or vice versa, or some other winger, there's been a drop defensively, but you didn't see that with AJD. And so I think it's very important that we understand that they back from being down 2-0. I mean, they played like it was, honestly, they played that match like they knew they could goals. And
And, you know, and don't get me wrong, Morrow had chances throughout the entire match, but the one he put away was easily his best opportunity of the match. You know, and the opportunity that Tomas put away was good. You know, it came off an AJD pressure up the middle off a corner kick or set piece, one of the two. I think it might have been a set piece, not a corner kick. But regardless, AJD pressured. You know, the ball was in the air and he came up and it bounced off him kind of awkwardly, but ultimately ended up falling to Tomas. Who just was able to put it away. You know, but it was, I look at it and I just have to, you know, again, I like to take a step back when I can, and I like to, you know, think things through, you know, in a lot of different ways. And I think if you take that step back and you think through the entire season and the struggles the team has had, I think it's hard to deny the influence that AJD has had and had last season on this team. And then especially going into this season, not having him, and also in playoffs not having him. I think you look at that Seattle match. I mean, you know, missing AJD in that Seattle match was a big deal. I mean, both of the Seattle matches. And so, you know, it's just, I think it's important going into this offseason that hopefully the Dynamo are willing to pay him what his value is, or at least somewhere close. I know our trend is not to do that necessarily, that we're going to go as low as we can go, but I do sincerely hope AJ is back next season. I think that there's just not a lot of right backs in this league or outside backs in this league that are on his level. And yeah, sure, we're going to have Lundqvist next season, but that's one outside back. Kevin Garcia is not an outside back.
I think this season pretty much sealed
that. It proved it. I mean, it proved it. But as a center back, he's a great backup as a center back. And, you know, I said it during the Open Cup when he had to come on for Sinderos. How many people in our section were sitting there, Cisco, when Garcia came on and they were just sitting there praying and losing their mind and, like, I mean, literally like, oh, God. I mean, they were literally, like, apoplectic about it. I mean, it was crazy. And then you see me literally turning around, guys, it's going to be okay. Kevin Garcia at center back is okay. I promise you, it's going to be okay. And sure enough, he was just fine. He was great. Probably the best I've actually seen him in a Dynamo uniform, which is great because if there's any match for him to be as good as he can be, it's that match. That's right. Somebody had mentioned Kevin Garcia before he came on. Cisco, it wasn't you. I want to say it was Travis, actually. But yeah, I mean, Kevin back next season as a backup center back. I mean, he's young, you know, compared to our other center backs. And, you know, who knows how long Sinderos still has on those legs. Who knows how long... you know, Leonardo's probably going to be back because he's not exactly on a large contract or anything. But, you know, it'll be interesting to see who comes back next season. I think the majority of this roster will be back. The majority of our starting 11 will be back. And the couple of players that may not be back will open up opportunities for us to find other players. You can't deny that, you know, everybody wants to say, oh, the Dynamo don't spend a lot of money. And while that's right, they spend, okay, what I think is confusing to me, and maybe to other fans as well, the Dynamo spend money. I think the problem is that what other other fans, when they say the Dynamo spend money, don't spend money, all they're looking at is just the salary budget. And the problem with that is that's not something the Dynamo have to spend money on. That's a choice thing. And just because a player doesn't have a high salary like a Mauro Manotas does not mean he's not a great player. Matt Jordan's responsibility was to come into this team as general manager as below their salary or playing salary says. And look, we've paid lots of money on transfers this season. We've ultimately paid anywhere from $9 to $10 million this offseason and season. And I think that gets lost in the shuffle because you see that $5.25 million graphic, which doesn't include Tyler Derrick. And who was the other one it didn't include? Pena. And it didn't include Pena. And don't get me wrong, Pena's not on a large salary or anything. But we paid, you know, around $1 million on his transfer. We paid $8.5 million for Elise. We paid what I believe to be about $2.5 million for Cabezas. Guess what? That's $10 million right there. That's just on 3 players to bring them in that have been good players. You know, there's no question that Elise has been a great player. There's no question Cabezas is a great player. There's no question that Pena has the potential and capability to be a great player. And there's no question that he can when even the Venezuelan national team is calling the kid up. That means they see something in him too, which means, hey, he's got a future. And I think the one thing Pena has that Mauro doesn't have, which is why I like having both of them, by the way, is that Pena is physical. He doesn't mind a physical match.
And there are some teams in MLS, their center backs are extremely physical. And he matches up against physical center backs well.
He pushes through.
Because he's okay with the physicality. It doesn't knock him off the ball. All it does is he finds a way to get his leverage and let those guys literally get out of position because of it.
And isn't also another a plus for Ronaldo Pena is that he's very versatile. Like he can play as a striker and as a winger.
He can, and Mauro can too. Let's not get it wrong. Mauro can play out wide. That's not their preferred or best positions, but they are capable of doing that. They're utility players. They can play in multiple positions. Like Elise and Kyoto, they can both play the wing. You know, Kyoto can play midfielder if he had to. Elise, I think, could do it if he had to. Both have played striker at one time or another. So I think it's just important to remember as we move into next season, and I think Phil hit the nail on the head when he said there's a lot of good to take away, not just from Open Cup, but from this season in general when it comes to the Dynamo. I am sick and tired of hearing fans say that this team sucks. The team doesn't suck. They've run into a lot of unfortunate circumstances that have led them into the situation they're in right now in terms of this season. But a team doesn't just win Open Cup randomly because they got lucky. Season knowing, hey, we were top 4 in the league just 2 years ago without losing many of those same players going into this season. Sure, we had our struggles in MLS play, but in Open Cup play, we were the best team in Open Cup play. We had the Golden Boot winner from MLS Open Cup play. Not MLS, but Open Cup play. And going into next season, we're gonna go get somebody. I don't know who it's gonna be. I don't have a name for you. If I did, I probably wouldn't share it anyways. But we're gonna go get somebody, and it's not gonna be somebody that's gonna make waves. It's not gonna be a Barco. It's not gonna be a Almiron. It's not gonna be a Joseph Martinez. But it's going to be a player that's going to be very much like a Mauro. It's going to be a player very much like a Pena, like an Elise, like a Kyoto, like a Cabezas. It's going to be a player that, given time, will prove to be an incredibly wise decision because as we begin to progress through these later years, we've now had Mauro for 4 seasons. We've had Cabezas for 2 seasons now. We've had Elise for 2 seasons, Kyoto for 2 seasons. As we progress through these additional seasons beyond the first couple, we're going to begin to see the reward of being patient with these players. We're going to see the reward for incredibly good scouting. We're going to see the payoff. Now, what does that mean in terms of how much money we're going to spend in the future? I don't think we continue to spend a whole lot of money because that's just not our style. And it's not that we're not going to spend a lot of money. It's that we're not going to spend a lot on salaries. We're going to target young players with high talent ceilings that, for 3 or 4 of those players, I could go technically buy a Zlatan for 3 or 4 of those younger players. But 3 or 4 of those younger players, if 2 of them pan out, I've already gotten more than I would have got out of Zlatan to begin with.
And for a longer time.
And for a longer period of time. And then I can sell them on. With Zlatan, you're not selling him on anywhere.
Yeah.
He's done.
And another thing, how
have the Galaxy looked? Are they even going to make playoffs at this point?
That's another.
Stay tuned, and we'll let you know next week.
Tonight at 5. But what I was going to say is also another thing would be that with how the pipeline is built between the Academy, RGV, and the Dynamo, I don't really think that they'll really need to be spending money to bring in players because they're already developing them into the system.
Exactly.
So they already know exactly how to mold them into the Dynamo first team.
I mean, the thing is, they have to spend the money that they're spending right now to get the players in a position to be able to let that pipeline build itself and show itself out. Mm-hmm. It takes seasons. I mean, Cisco's pointing it out in chat. It took the Astros with the lowest payroll, and they still have one of the lowest payrolls. Lowest payroll for years. They lost 100 games for 3 consecutive seasons. Now they've got a World Series, and they're in their third consecutive playoffs, and second consecutive 100-win season. And they just set the franchise record for wins this season, didn't they?
Was it like 103?
Did they? So they set it this season. Yeah, so they set it this season. Franchise record for wins, and that's after having really good seasons previously before the changeover. So I want you guys, and I know you do, you take this away anyways, and you know this, but it's important to remember as Dynamo fans, especially when people are out there and they're proclaiming the Dynamo don't spend money, or on Reddit that, this team sucks because of X, Y, Z, or whatever it may be. It's important to remember that that's all based on a lack of understanding and education as to the reality of what's going on. And I continue to say it's really important for us to look at the rest of MLS. Everybody wants to applaud what Atlanta's doing, but if Almiron and Martinez leave in the offseason for them, what do they have left? They're going to struggle after that.
What if Martino leaves?
What if Tata leaves to go to the Mexican national team or U.S. national team? God forbid he goes to Mexico, because that would just be the absolute. It would suck. Like, for a U.S. fan, that would be like the worst. I would literally vomit at the thought. Not because I don't want Mexico to be great, but because I don't want Mexico to be good. So anyway, look, okay, we've beat the drum about so many things tonight. It's been a fantastic show. Again, a huge shout out to Hal for coming on and talking NWSL and his incredible insight into the inner workings of NWSL, his incredible insight into the history and building of the Dash, and just what he brings from an NWSL standpoint. A huge shout out and thank you to Phil West again for coming on. Phil, you probably won't see this, but thank you for coming on. We really do appreciate it. And I know I've said that like 18 times, but I mean it, and that's why I'm saying it so many times. And seriously, go buy his book. He's an incredible writer. He's a very good writer. And his style is just easy to read. It's not, you don't get bogged down in the details. It's kind of an enjoyable read, actually, to sit back and read it.
Which, by the way, is one of the reasons why when you said his name, I was like, yes. There was no doubt in my mind. I was like, yes.
So anyway, with that being said, we're going to call it so we can go watch some Rockets preseason basketball and then go play some FIFA. So Cisco apparently can, quote-unquote, kick my ass at FIFA. Yeah, we'll see how that works out. Maybe we'll record some of that tonight.
Well,
can you get the Elgato set up in time?
Yeah. I mean, if you guys are going to be watching the...
Well, I mean, the game is eventually going to be over. Don't worry about
that. I know,
that.
that's fine. That gives me time to set
up. Yeah, you got time. Yeah, he's not going anywhere anytime soon. He doesn't have work in the morning. It's okay.
Unlike the rest of us.
Well, I mean...
Thankfully, I don't have to be up till like 8:45 tomorrow.
So be sure
I have to be up earlier tomorrow. No, it's okay. I'm going to be all right.
Guys, be sure to join us in a couple of hours. Well, not a couple of hours. In a couple of minutes.
Just stay tuned to our YouTube channel. It'll pop up when we go live with our FIFA broadcasting. Whenever that does happen. Anyways, thanks again for tuning in. You've been listening to Generation Orange, a Houston internet soccer. You messed me up. Thank you for you didn't. I mean, just in general, laughing at you earlier messed me up this time. Thank you for listening to Generation Orange, a Houston internet soccer show and podcast. We appreciate everyone that came on this week. I don't know where I was going to go with that, and that's why there was that long, weird pause. We'll be back next week, every Tuesday at Instagram.
Down in the RGV.
Down in the RGV as well. And their Twitter is down in the RGV. And make sure you tune into Down in the Valley. Oh man, we didn't even get to do Down in the Valley Express this week.
That's fine.
Ooh, wow. This hour went by.
I have to say that
it was an hour and a half, not 2 hours. I got to throw that out there. But
all I have to say, it's just going to be an interesting discussion about how people are viewing the Toros in the Valley.
That actually sounds like a really good discussion. All right. Well, with that being said, thanks again, guys. Y'all have a good one.
Thank you.
Forever Orange, Somos Toros. Oh, I'm gone already.
No, that's fine. Go
okay, Somos Toros. I'm back.
Hey, guys.
Forever Orange, Somos Toros, Dash TF on.
And we are Gen Orange.
And we are Gen Orange.
Take care.
Now we're gone. Bye, guys. Bye. Okay, they saw it. It faded out.